Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Emotionally Healthy Leader Podcast. I'm Pete.
I'm Geri.
And our topic today, or our theme today, is the one skill that will make or break your life and leadership.
Right. As a matter of fact, there wouldn't be a podcast today. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast today, actually, if it wasn't for this skill.
Isn't it truth? It's the skill that launched us on this whole journey 28 years ago now, 28 plus years ago on this journey we call Discipleship. So, all right, this is the sixth, honey, of 8 podcasts that we've done so far. And let's go. We started with the community temperature reading. Then we moved into stop mind reading, clarify expectations, genogram your family, explore the iceberg. And now we are on what we call incarnational listening. So the one skill that will make or break your leadership. So all very dramatic titles. But why, honey, is this one the one skill that will make or break your life and leadership? Why is this, like, in some ways, the most dramatic title of all?
I think a couple of them have been pretty dramatic.
That's true. That's true.
And, I know we've said this before, but if the goal of our spiritual lives, the goal of our humanity is to love well,
this gets at it.
This gets at it.
True.
You really can't love well yourself or others or God, really, without this skill.
Let's just dive in. This was the turning point for us in our personal lives, our marriage, our family, our leadership, our church. Here we are many years later. So why don't we talk about our first 17 years as Christians and as leaders and what we were like in the way that we spoke and listened, and then how this skill, once we learned it, was a revolution for us.
I'll let you begin.
Okay, good. Well, we were, we're 7, 8 years into our marriage, and we were at a wall.
But about 17 years into leadership.
That's true. And our way of communicating was machine gun fire. In fact, I remember thinking about this today. Someone said to me that we know well years ago, "Oh, you're not a pastor, Pete." And I thought I was very pastoral. And I realized, what he was saying, you're a teacher, Pete, not a pastor.
Oh, wow.
And what he was referring to was the fact of I was such a terrible listener. And I guess it made sense. He looked at me and said I was a talker and a teacher, but not a listener.
Right.
Didn't know how to be present. So the way that I know we spoke to each other, and probably the way I spoke to everybody and listened, was machine gun fire. And I didn't listen real well. I finished people's sentences. I was thinking about my rebuttal when they were talking. So it's just something I never got trained to do, never thought about. I just did what my family of origin did. The way that we didn't listen, I didn't listen.
Right.
And the way I spoke was the way we all spoke. We crossed communications with each other, just spoke over each other. So that's how we lived the first 8 years of our marriage. That's how I functioned as a leader for the first 17 years, how I functioned as a pastor.
Yeah. And, I think somewhere along the line, we must have heard about listening for understanding, but I had no idea really, I guess, what that meant.
Yep.
Because like you, I grew up in a family where you listened so you could rebut what the other person said, or just wait for your turn. You're listening for your turn so you can then give your opinion. But there wasn't listening for understanding, and there certainly wasn't listening for feelings that were underneath what the person was saying either. Yeah.
So what happened to us was we were stuck. As many of you know, you've heard our podcast. We were stuck in our marriage. We were at a wall. We were missing each other. We were in a counselor's office, and he taught us a simplified version of what we call incarnational listening today. And he provided a safe, what'd you call it, honey, a structure to help us to actually listen to each other. And it was, I know, the first time in my life I ever felt someone present to me, listened to. And it's the first time I think I ever listened to you or anybody. I just didn't know how. I'd never seen it, never experienced it. And it was it opened up a whole world.
Yeah, I think I remember. I mean, I can remember all those years back, even though it was 28 years ago. I can remember that experience we
Me too.
had and how life-changing it was for us because there was so much going on, even though we couldn't name the parts of it then, but you felt heard for the first time. I'll never forget you saying, I feel heard for the first time, like in my life.
Yes.
But there's another element that was going on that I recognize now, and that you felt seen. It was just similar to feeling heard. And I felt heard.
Yes.
It was also the quality of this type of listening integrated, which was extremely important, I guess critical to the skill, is it integrated feelings.
Yeah.
And last week, I think it was, we talked about Explore the Iceberg. And, when someone asked me growing up how I felt, it was really mostly in reference to if you were sick, like, how are you feeling? How are you feeling?
Yeah.
I never understood, the range of my emotions and sharing those emotions. But in this experience we had, we were asked, how do you feel?
Yeah.
And then share that with Pete or share that with Geri.
Yes.
And that was pretty revolutionary. But because we had to even both kind of, become aware of even what we were feeling in order to share that. So there was a lot going on. But again, we had a nice, we had a guide with us to help us. Because,
So it's a core part of the Emotionally Healthy Relationships course, for sure. And we've broadened and deepened the skill so it's actually transferable. I just remember the first time that we actually did the skill ourselves. I remember saying, "Oh my goodness!" It was an experience of the glory of God. Like I didn't have a theology for it. All I knew was God's glory came in the room, and we were at that point. I'd been to so many revival meetings, power meetings. I'd see, we were a charismatic church. I'd had incredible encounters with God in scripture, of course, and worship and prayer meetings and power encounters, but nothing compared to the glory of God that happened between us in that moment. And I just remember being completely floored because I wasn't expecting it and realized that I had been born again. It was a change that launched me and eventually going to launch us and our leadership and our church into this whole thing we call emotionally healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a born again experience. If you have gone your whole life not being seen, not being heard, not being validated. And, that's kind of a lot of what was going on. But don't be deceived. It wasn't all roses. I mean, it brought also out our shadow in terms of, that's why you have a guide. We had a guide for the first time because if you're asking someone how they feel and you want them to be honest, well, most people aren't used to being honest with another person about their feelings and their feelings maybe towards that person. And so I remember thinking, can I really say what I think and feel? Can I really say what I think and feel? But of course, you're saying it in a very clear, respectful way. But honesty is not easy if you're not used to being honest.
And we weren't used to being honest.
No, we weren't.
With each other even.
No, because we didn't know how to say difficult things. Or again, we had rules against, around, there's a lot's going on. There had rules against certain feelings and et cetera, et cetera.
I also realized very quickly, like, oh my goodness, like I've been discipled in so much head knowledge of biblical doctrine and teaching. And I was, of course, a pastor at that point for years and teaching scripture and such an emphasis on head and loving God, but I'd never been taught or discipled in how to love other people. It was just a missing piece of, it was just discipleship. And it was assumed, if you love Jesus, it'll all work out.
Well, I mean, you write scripture, we're discipled in the sense that we're told, well, love is patient.
Yes.
Love is kind. Love is gentle. But what does that look like? Like, how do you do that? And we have no idea the tsunami we're coming against in terms of our formation in our families. We're so formed in our families that's going to takes a lot to break up that ground and be reformed in the new family of Christ.
So, of course, we developed now one of the core skills of the emotionally healthy relationships course is incarnational listening. And so, Geri, why don't you talk about, like, one of the marks, of course, in the new family of Jesus is we're present with each other. We learn, like, Jesus was present, we can be present. So why don't you talk a few minutes about, because you were expounding earlier, it was amazing. I said, Geri, hold that thought about Jesus and presence and why this is so essential to true spirituality.
Well, I want to first undergird that with the fact that, again, this skill was so difficult for us in the beginning because my life stance, more or less, my life posture, even though I'd been a follower of Christ for 18 years at that point, was one of defensiveness. I had no idea. I didn't even know the depth of my defensiveness until Pete was able to also speak honestly to me. And I could but again, we had a guide. And that's why there's the safety net around this skill is you have to also learn how to speak. Listening well, listening for understanding requires also a speaker who learns how to speak clearly, openly, right, honestly. And so when you have someone who's committed to speaking respectfully, it makes the defensiveness less, but it'll bring things out of you that you didn't know were there. But the light has to shine on those things so that you can grow.
Yes.
So, but the goal, but what happened as a result of us learning to really listen to one another and feel one another was that we learned presence. We learned attunement. That is, how do I attune to another human being? I guess there's lots of different ways you can describe attunement and presence, but I like the description that they see that I see them. Mm. Pete sees that I see them. And that's a big part of even my relationship with God. When in my silence, part of my silence is seeing that God sees me.
He's the God who sees.
He's the
that
God.
Story of Hagar in Genesis.
Right. So presence involves all of that, listening in a way that you see that I see you. You listening in a way that you feel felt by me. In other words, if you say, Geri, I was afraid, well, then I know the feeling of fear. I know that same feeling in my body. And as you share that feeling and I feel it, and I feel it, there is a connection made that just can't be made without presence to that.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot being experienced in this skill of incarnational listening.
And define attunement. You mentioned attunement is that the other person feels felt by us.
That's one part of it. One aspect of attunement is that the other person sees that I see them. They feel felt by me. That's as the person who's on the receiving end. As the person who's doing the attuning, one of the things attunement involves is the whole person. I'm not just taking in your words. I'm seeing your body language. Yeah. I'm seeing the slouch of your shoulders. I'm noticing the tone in your voice. I'm watching your facial expressions. That's so much language for me to kind of understand what's going on with you as well, And and it's important, like even as a person who's maybe on the speaker, they also have to learn congruency. If a person says, I was really angry, they're not really feeling their anger. That's not congruency. I felt so angry, and on the other hand, if a person says something like, I wasn't angry. Now, their words totally don't match the tone of voice.
That's good.
And so, yeah, these are important. You want to become integrated. Yeah. So as a speaker, I'm becoming integrated with myself in awareness of what I'm thinking and feeling. And that's matching my tone, my body. It's all matching. And as a listener is observing, those things.
And and I think we realized quickly after we jumped into this, how Jesus was so present. Oh. He was present with people. He looked at the rich young ruler, and it says he loved him. He was present with the Samaritan woman. He was present with the person with leprosy. He was present.
He was attuned. He saw.
Good.
He was attuned to how people were putting their offerings in the offering basket, especially the wealthy. He was attuned to and saw the faith. What did he see? He saw the faith of the friends of the paralyzed man. So he lived attuned.
Should we model it? Shall we?
Sure.
Geri, so can I do some incarnation? Would you mind doing incarnational listening with me right now?
I'd love to.
Thanks, honey. It'll be brief since we're on a podcast.
Okay.
So I'm realizing now that something going on in my life, and that there's a lack of spaciousness in my life, and that's so important to me.
Okay. Wow. So right now, you're recognizing that you have a lack of spaciousness, and that's really important to you.
Yeah. We've just finished the Thanksgiving holiday, and then we're moving into now Christmas. And we have grandchildren who are having birthdays and children having birthdays. And between that, and it's a lot.
That's right. I'm catching that. So you're aware that we just had a holiday, right? And we have another holiday coming up. And in between that, we have grandchildren birthdays and we have daughter birthdays. And you're feeling the impact of all these things happening in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, Thanksgiving alone was a 3-day visits coming into our house.
That's right.
With people all day, 3 days in a row. That was a lot.
Yeah. So even Thanksgiving, we had 3 days of activity, people activity, cooking activity, a lot of activity.
And of course, I'm looking now at the next couple of weeks as we approach Christmas, and I realize, there's a lot more people we're going to be seeing. And you've mentioned wanting to see some of your friends and having them over for visits and hosting some parties. And I realize I am feeling anxious.
So I just want to make sure I got it. But you're looking at the next holiday and all the stuff that's kind of involved in that, and maybe in particular hosting. And you've heard me say several times that the who I want to host and the how I want to host. And that is, I don't know, did you share a feeling around that?
I'm anxious. I'm feeling anxious because I realize, she wants to have these dinners at our house with these other folks as well. And it's a big time of year for me at Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. End of the year. And also we're caring for our daughter's medical needs, one of our daughters, that also takes some time.
Wow. Okay. So in light of not just the holiday and me mentioning, what I'd like to do in that month, I'm adding more stuff to the month, you're thinking about the number of things you have to do for EHD, the end of the month, as well as you are in charge of and have been attending to the medical stuff of one of our daughters, especially the bills, etc.
So I am wanting greater spaciousness as we move into this month, greater ability to kind of breathe, not feel pressure. And so I don't want stuff being piled on. And so I'd like to have a conversation with you about our schedule, looking at our calendar.
So you are feeling the lack of spaciousness, and you see stuff just like being piled on to the month. And you said you are feeling anxious about that. So you would like us to have a meeting like we got to sit down and talk about this month so that you can make sure you have the spaciousness in it that you need. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can look at, yes, I'd like to get a calendar out, have a relaxed meeting about looking at the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay. So you want to actually get the calendar out and look at specifically next 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
To make sure you have spaciousness.
Yeah. I don't want personally, I don't want to have more things to do than there is time to do it.
Okay. You don't want to get into that place where there's more things to do than there is time to do it. That's a terrible place. Yeah. How are you feeling about all these things?
I feel good that I articulated it. I feel better.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're feeling better.
I feel better that I got it out.
Okay. So you feel better having said all that. Yep. But of everything you shared, what's the most important thing you'd want me to remember?
That I'm longing for greater spaciousness after these busy. We had a very full holiday around Thanksgiving. That I really long for spaciousness these coming weeks before Christmas. And I really want us to get together and talk about our calendar. Look at it really carefully before we make commitments this month.
Okay. So as a result of the last month, you've been feeling really cramped. And so you want to, again, look at the calendar. You want me to really know that it's really important to you that we look at the calendar this month so that you can create and know you have spaciousness in your life. Did I get that?
You did. I feel, just the fact that you heard me, I feel better already.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, honey.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, you want to make any comments about this? Well, that was a glimpse for them into incarnational listening and a taste of it.
Yeah, and it's a real gift exchange, right? I mean, it's a gift for the speaker.
Yep.
Because I gave you space to just be listened to.
Yep.
And it's a gift to the listener because you're being honest and truthful and giving, and just allowing me to see what's going on and know what's going on inside of you.
Yeah, and for me, to be able to have you being so present with me about, I know you wanted to have your friends over for a couple different evenings. And the fact that you're open to looking at the calendar and you heard me, I just know we'll be fine when we talk about it. But versus it's just yes, where we just make these commitments without talking about it. So I feel very heard. And thanks. I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and also kind of not a disaster, but really would be problematic if you just kept going along with everything, feeling the crampedness, feeling the lack of spaciousness, feeling anxiety, and just going along because you just thought you had to, versus just saying, hey, you're the one that have to take responsibility for what you're feeling and be aware of it and then go, wow, I need to express this. And, because otherwise, I might pick up leaking you're doing or body language, and I can initiate then the conversation. But really, the onus is on this, your part. So again, that's why it's a gift to the listener that you don't start leaking, and that you give me the gift of honesty.
So in the Emotionally Healthy Relationships course, you're given guidelines for incarnational listening.
Yes.
And very clear guidelines. And we sometimes say we're putting people into a very tight structure. Again, if you put it this way, people's bones are broken, Ephesians 4. And leadership is to put bones in place. We equip people for the sake of, for maturity. And that's a word used often for putting the bones in place. In some ways, we put a structure that can feel like a straitjacket for some people. But when done well, it's natural. This was very natural and felt really good to me as the speaker. I didn't feel like you were parroting me. So again, you'll pick up some of those nuances, those of you listening, when you do the course.
So even though I was parroting you, pretty much, I was staying pretty close to the words that you were using, but you didn't feel like it. You didn't feel like it was just this rote thing, right? You didn't.
You were present. I felt your presence.
Right.
And as you said, incarnational listening is a training in presence.
Well, yeah, it's a training in many things, but yeah, presence is a big one.
One big thing. So let's make some applications for leadership.
Okay. Yeah. And again, we're not going into the mechanics of this skill because you can watch that and learn that in the course, the Emotionally Healthy Relationship course. That's where you get all that information. Yeah.
Okay. So I got 4 or 5 here, and let's just make some applications for leadership since it's the Emotionally Healthy Leader podcast. So the first is that application is being present is core to our formation and maturity as leaders. That being present is core. And that it requires great character and differentiation to be able to do this, especially when people are saying things that are difficult for us.
Right.
And that, what's the stat use? That 80% of problems are solved even by our own listening to people.
Yes. And again, in marriage or friendships, in our marriage, we learn to begin to say difficult things to each other, but within the safety of this structure. Again, we have to speak clearly, honestly, respectfully. But even though we were married and we made a vow till death, it was still really hard to say difficult things to each other.
Yeah.
But it got easier and easier and easier because of the safety around us that we created. But this was the ground we practiced on to be able to say it to other people in other relationships. And you're talking about applying it to leadership.
Yep.
But we had to practice here in order for you to begin to
do it
right there. And I'm so aware. When Pete would speak difficult things to me, again, about me, I would be cheering on the inside because I'm thinking I knew that if Pete could say difficult things to me, then he could speak difficult things to other people whom he needed to speak difficult things to.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win.
And I think I had
but it takes a lot of maturity.
I had a revolution of what it meant to be a leader, that God is love, and that I want to be a great lover of people. That was a gigantic shift. Like I was measuring my success now by being present with people versus growing our church, more numbers, getting people's affirmation. It was just revolutionary for me.
Wow.
In my self-identity. It was gigantic.
And it's so much more fun. It's much more fun to be present with people and recognize that people can feel felt by you. People can be seen by you as God sees them. That's much more fun. I don't know if the word is fun, but it's much more fulfilling than trying to get their approval.
Oh, gosh. Truth. Okay. Number 2, leadership application would be our ability to be present is core to building great teams, healthy boards, and healthy communities, ministries. I mean, it's just this one skill is just life and death for great teams and great boards. And because differences are going to happen. Seasons come and go. There's just so much to negotiate and an inability to negotiate differences. And it just causes pain, havoc, depression, loneliness.
There's so much unnecessary pain. Can I mention one thing?
Please, honey. Okay. You're the best thing that happened to this podcast ever since you came on.
Stop. Was, now, as Pete talked about, if you're doing it with your team, you're doing it with your board, you're doing it with the powers that be. But as you get better at it, now you're internalizing it. In other words, every time you're having a board meeting, you're not repeating back every word a board member says or every word a staff person says, even though there may be times when you sit with one person and use the structure very specifically. But the goal, like any of the skills, is that we internalize it. And the internalizing of listening that's what we mean. When you internalize it, it means you're learning to be present with the person. That's what you're learning, to be present with them without even having to repeat everything.
That's why you always say, if I can quote Geri Scazzero, these are the training wheels to ride a bike. And there comes a place you don't need the training wheels anymore because it's inside of you and you're just present with people and they can feel it and experience it. So, all right. Thirdly, that incarnational listening, this kind of a presence with people, this maturity, this skill is core to, in a sense, a new operating system as a church or ministry hits new challenges. So, for example, the election, like right now in the United States, right now the country's so polarized, and churches are polarized. And so how do you have discussions? Well, the key is to learn to be present with each other, even though the person may have a totally different view than you do politically. Same with LGBTQ. How do I be present with folks on different sides of that issue? How do I listen to people with a different view than I have? Presence is core.
This skill was so indispensable for us because we had a church with about 73 nations represented in it. Now, how do you cross cultures?
Yeah.
Pete, in our first year of marriage, in the first 5 months of our marriage, we found ourselves living overseas for almost a year. And so, we ate their food. We
learn their language.
We learned their language. We lived with the family of 10 children. We try to do as best we can their culture, but we were missing this. We were missing truly listening and being present with people.
We didn't incarnate like Jesus.
We didn't incarnate. We thought we were incarnating, but really the key to incarnation is being present, learning how to be present with another person. And so this was indispensable for us to build a healthy community across so many ethnicities and so many cultures and such diversity economically in every way. There was diversity in every way. Even people were coming from all different backgrounds of faith, really. Yeah. But it was this being able to listen and be present with people that enables. That was the bridge.
Yep.
That was the bridge.
Isn't it? So we call it incarnational listening. This is an active listening, like you learn a college 101 course. Jesus left his world and entered our world. And we realized that we were living cross-culturally. We'd gone to another country, but we didn't know how to incarnate into each other's world. And we were the same race and culture, kind of culture, American culture at least. And that this was so foundational to following Jesus in every context. It was just,
in some ways, it should be called incarnational feeling
or presence
or incarnational presence. But because a key moment in the skill is when the speaker shares their feelings. So when Pete said, "I'm feeling anxious," or "I'm feeling a lack of spaciousness," I have to pause as a listener. And it's a critical moment because that's what I'm feeling. I have to feel what that feels like if I'm going to really, you're talking about Christ entered our world and we enter each other's world. But I enter another person's world by feeling what they feel. So when he said, "I'm anxious, I'm feeling a lack of spaciousness," I'm thinking to myself and I'm feeling like, okay, what does that feel like? What does a lack of spaciousness feel like? It's like feeling trapped. I could feel like I'm suffocating, and it's horrible. It's horrible. And so when I feel that, I can communicate. He knows I'm feeling what he's feeling in a sense. And that's a key component of entering each other's worlds.
True. It's interesting. We didn't solve anything in our little interaction there, but I feel like we did, just because I felt.
What's the feeling you had though? Not like I feel like we did. No, as a result of our conversation,
relieved.
You feel relieved,
like a load off my shoulders. I just felt. I felt spacious because I even though you didn't say yes, I'm willing to set a time. I knew you felt me that I need to, and that was just it was just wonderful. And I'm a high feeler.
You're a high feeler.
Oh goodness. Okay. Another application for and final one is that incarnational listening or attunement done well is actually the key to building a healthy countercultural community for Jesus. It's just we begin to see people as thous and not it's, the whole Martin Buber things. I'm open. I'm present with people, not distracted. I'm loving, not judging, and that we're creating communities that are actually compassionate and not judgmental because we're open to learn. We're curious. And so that's why it connects to maturity and differentiation. It's raising the whole level of a community into more Christ-likeness and greater level of differentiation.
Yeah.
To be with someone who sees life so differently, but I can be present with them and actually learn some things at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we've mentioned, we haven't really used the word empathy, but part of, again, entering another person's world and them experiencing compassion, because Christ, I mean, how many times, right? Just talk about the word compassion in scripture and in his life, that empathy is, I never experienced empathy growing up. I had no idea how to have empathy, to feel empathy for another person. And really important empathy. Another person, you giving empathy, you feeling empathy, them feeling empathized is really an important part of compassion.
It's huge.
I'm not trying to, you know what's so wonderful too? You're not trying to fix anything. I'm not even responsible for their life. They're responsible for their life, but I'm joining them on the companion on the journey just by giving them space to kind of help discover stuff that's going on inside of them, Beautiful. Yeah, it is. So it is. Okay.
So in the last application for leadership application is, I wish I could quote you better as you were talking earlier, is that present, or to be deeply felt or attuned to, it is the felt need of our culture. People want to feel loved and have someone attuned to them.
Well, I think
people, you talk about how people medicate into all kinds of things.
Yes. We understand now from neurobiology that we're wired to be seen. We're wired to be attuned to. So when there isn't presence, there's absence. And when there's absence, many times people will fill it by medicating. So you might, medicate through, shopping, through food addiction, through pornography, through social media. I mean, it's kind of endless. And that's why actually one of the things that really moves me about the emotionally healthy discipleship courses, and maybe in particular, the emotionally healthy relationship course, is because we're opening a door for people to learn presence so that they don't have to medicate. It's huge.
It's like an evangelistic tool without it.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Jesus said, all the world will know that we're his disciples, by the way, that we love each other. And so it's interesting, huh? Love, attunement, listening is all so deeply connected together.
Yes. And again, we're making it sound, and it is beautiful.
But
but I will say you will go through many dangers, toils, and snares to make it beautiful, only because it brought out so much of my shadow.
Yes.
But I was so glad to, if you create a safe environment for that shadow to come out, my blaming, my defensiveness, my judgmentalism, my criticalness, et cetera, you can let go of those things that you've been carrying around.
Wow. You're so different than you used to. Who are you?
As he keeps reinforcing every
podcast,
every
40 years later. Thank you, honey. So we want to encourage you, pick up the Emotionally Healthy Relationships workbook and day by day devotional that goes with it. Please watch the videos. It will change your life. Do it even with one other person, and you can pick it up anywhere. Our website, Amazon, Christian book distributors, you name it. It's everywhere, but please plunge into it. You'll be so glad you did. And if you want to learn a skill, but you don't think you're safe enough for each other, Pete and I weren't safe enough for each other when we first learned this, we got a coach, or a therapist to help to be that safe person. Mature mentor, anybody who's got some maturity can be that, help you. Or a lot of maturity. That's true. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been great to be with you, honey. Thank you. It's been great to be with you. A lot of fun here. And I look forward to seeing you again in our next Emotionally Healthy Leader podcast. God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you.